Welcome to Real Money Talks. Real strategies from the moneymakers and the world changers that you can use to make millions, keep those millions, multiply your wealth, and build your team. Here's your host, author of 5 New York Times bestsellers, money expert on Dr. Phil, CNN, CNBC, The Street TV, Fox News, and The View, Loral Langemeier.
Hi, this is Loral. Welcome back to Loral's Real Money Talks, a podcast that we talk about making money, keeping money, investing money, doing it with a team. And whether it's through business or you're employed and you want a business on the side, we are going to talk a lot about how do you make more money and a couple different pathways to do that. Joint ventures, which I'm enormous, not only fan of, believer in. It's what not only has built the companies that I've built, but still continues even in the cannabis space, the crypto space we're moving into. Those are all joint ventures. So we're going to talk about joint ventures. We're going to talk about masterminding today. And I have a dear friend, and I'm going to say fellow Canadian because I actually, my husband's in Calgary right now. So Jay Fiset, Jay, welcome to Loral's Real Money Talks.
Hey, Laurel, thank you so much for having me. And I guess if you marry a Canadian, you do get honorary Canadian status, don't you?
I do. I was even, white-hatted, that whole Calgary, cowboy thing where, they give you a white hat for, I guess, contributing to the Canadian economy or something like that.
Well,
kind
honestly,
of fun.
That's a big deal. It's a tradition that is left for like diplomats and high-end Olympians and those sorts of things. So I think you got the white hat. Good for you.
Yeah, I got a white hat. It's pretty cool. So, Jay, before we jump into joint ventures and masterminds as ways to accelerate money, or for some that are listening, want a new way to make money, tell us a little bit about you, because you've come from, a variety of backgrounds. Just kind of build your business credibility to our audience and talk a little bit about the businesses you've run.
Perfect. Well, put it this way, I have been an entrepreneur for the past 33 years plus. And I spent most of my time in the personal transformation space. So we ran a company in Calgary called Personal Best Seminars, which has become the Creator's Code, where we've had about 40,000 people travel from all over the world to go through our intense personal transformation programs. About 6-7 years ago, somebody said to me, I was at a mastermind, as you and I often, I think we met at a mastermind. I was at a mastermind where somebody was complaining about they were having trouble running their premium mastermind. And I said, well, you know what? I've been training my coaches, my facilitators, my trainers for 25 years internally from masterminds, because at the end of the personal development process, we moved them into masterminds for long-term support. I said, I have all these resources. I'll just give them to you. And if it helps, great. And that little gift turned into a brand that didn't exist, which became Mastermind to Millions. And we went from zero, because the brand didn't exist, to $2.6 million in 14 months. So it struck a nerve, and, it's one of those things that people would say, it's like, oh, you're jumping on the mastermind bandwagon. Well, yeah, about a quarter century ago. So it was just this whole thing of doing something that, we were exceptional at and had done for decades that we then made available to the front lines of coaches, experts, trainers, authors, and truly took off. So that was kind of fun. But in my past, in that process, I've always been, let's just call it, an adventurous entrepreneur. So I've owned commercial real estate for, a long, long while. Residential real estate, we've always had a little portfolio of. I've owned restaurants, payday loan companies, insurance companies. I'm missing a bunch of stuff in there, but our mode was always this. We'd make a little bit of money in our personal development company. We would invest it elsewhere. And that, outside of a couple of fiascos, as you know, sometimes that happens, that has turned exceptionally well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about masterminding first. I'm a huge masterminder. Our whole community masterminds under the, Napoleon Hill, I'd say, principles and how we do it. But talk about masterminds from we both do them. I think most of the people that listen to the podcast probably have done them. But when you teach it, you're teaching somebody, say author, coach, trainer, how to create a mastermind as an additional stream of revenue. So just talk about bridging that gap for our listeners.
Well, I think here's the most important piece to this, is that masterminds are one of the fastest ways to create income, because it puts us in the middle of deal flow. It connects us with people that we can have long-term relationships with. And it quite literally, when done well, what a mastermind does is it gets us access to network, resources, experience, and wisdom. And if there's 10 or 15 people who are moving and shaking entrepreneurs, who are all making money, who all have deal flow, who all have processes going on, quite literally, we can 10x or 15x our access to resources, network, experience, and wisdom. And when that happens, the cash register rings. But it's one thing, because lots of people, I think a mutual friend of ours talks about getting on the correct side of the cash register. But it's one thing to go to a mastermind, but it's a completely different thing. And in my joint venture business called JVology, we teach it. It's a completely different thing to create our own mastermind, where we then stand in the position of incredible leverage, influence, and quite frankly, power. And we create our own little mastermind joint venture syndicate that we can begin to strategically and wisely put together a team of people that can go out and quite literally print money. So to me, the mastermind, it's true.
Yep.
Like it really is true. So the mastermind piece really is, yes, you can run a mastermind on a particular topic, but you can also create your own JV or entrepreneurial mastermind group. That is one of our stands, and the first thing we teach in JVology, which is our joint venture training business.
Absolutely. So I've been doing, again, masterminds forever. And like you said, printing money. So I think for those listening, what we're guiding to, is what I've been doing, it's how I run mine. So I run private coaching, and then all my clients are put in masterminds of 5 or 6 people. And then they're either led by someone if they want some content expertise, like we do a lot of analyzing and a reading of, I'm going to say, books, topics. Right now, there's so much activity in the cannabis and crypto space, and a lot of people learning and masterminding around this topic. So framing it that way, Jay, talk about, does it need to be topical? Can it just be around personal development? So if someone's, listening going, how would I start my own mastermind? What are some of the structures for that?
That was 110 questions in one.
I know. Well, I gave you a lot of, range to answer any of them.
Yes. So I think here's the long and the short of it is this. I am a raving fan of joint ventures. And joint ventures are one of the fastest ways in which we can get the wheels on the bus. And what I mean by getting the wheels on the bus is get to a spot where we don't have to chase money, and we can, in fact, go make money as a part of the game and the fun and a method of contribution. So this whole idea of cannabis, crypto, and by the way, artificial intelligence is coming and is going to change an incredible amount of things, the transportation industry, all of these pieces. So yes, you can have a mastermind that is exclusively related to personal development. And you can position, if you are a personal development leader, if you are a trained Reiki master, if you are a certified coach, and you have a particular, I sometimes, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, you have a particular magic trick that you have a tribe of people who want to master that magic trick, you are uniquely positioned to create a mastermind. Like, full stop. That's fantastic. But generally, those masterminds are about the transfer of wisdom, knowledge, personal context to make space for somebody to go out and make money. I'll tell you the thing that I am currently most inspired by. And that's all well and fine to do. I don't want to diminish that in any way, shape, or form. But what I'm really working on our joint venture mastery members, I'm asking them to start their own joint venture mastermind, their own joint venture syndicate, where they hand select people and communities. They want access to communities. They want access to deal flow in cannabis. They want access to deal flow in real estate. They want access to deal flow in digital marketing. They want access to deal flow in artificial intelligence. And what we're helping people do is to go out and select 8, 10, 12 people that they quite frankly want to do 2 things. They want to ride the wave of the technological transformations that are coming our way. And they want to have a safety net of how to cope with the epic changes that are coming our way. And when you weave those 2 things together strategically into a joint venture mastermind, the truth of the matter is that just one great deal over a span of time will make multiple 7 figures. And that's really what we're working on now. So I want people to think about it from this perspective of how do you put these 2 things together? And that's where this gets really exciting.
And that's where this gets really exciting. Well, and I will just share, personally, I think you and I have joint ventured, right? Where I've supported you, you supported me. I mean, this podcast is a version of that, right? Where we give each other access to, our followers. So if people have no followers, right, then how do they go from a dead start? And then a different question that I want, so we'll both come back to it, is the deal flow. Because I want to explain, almost 99% of all my alternative investing, my cannabis partner, came from a joint venture, which then led into he and I doing cannabis masterminds, which is going to lead into us offering a cannabis coaching program next year. So it just keeps multiplying when you find right partners. So kind of a different revenue question, but let's go to that person that's out there listening going, well, that's great, Loral and Jay, and that you did it. And you could name your list of A-listers that you JV with, and I could name mine. But somebody that's saying, I just have 500 people that follow me. How do I get started? Is it even possible?
Short answer is hell yes. And the first step is to join joint venture communities. And I mean, this might sound like a absolute blatant plug for me, and perhaps it is, but there's a strategy to this that only makes sense. So we are, for example, in the midst of, if you were to think of 3 regional entrepreneurial communities, and think of like Startup Grind, the world's largest meetup group, BNI, and eWomen's. And if you were to think of, Startup Grind, eWomen's, and BNI had a threesome and had a baby.
Hey, oh my God, of all your examples you could use.
It's like, by the way, that terrible line is my test to see if somebody has a sense of humor. If they even smirk a little bit, you're my people. If they don't, if they think that's totally offside and inappropriate, you're not my people. Just so you know, as listeners. But imagine they had a baby. That baby would be what we call JVology, the perfect mix of people, fun, and profit. And we are actually in 2019 launching global face-to-face communities so that we can actually have an environment all over the world for us to go and connect with people face-to-face who understand what a JV is, understand what a deal flow is, can make a reasonable JV invitation, and collaborate with this network, wisdom, experience, and resources. Now, I think everybody listening to this in 2019 should join our communities globally. Now, if it's not us, that's all well and fine. There are still communities that you must join, because please understand this, folks. You have to get on a plane, on a train, in an automobile, get your ass to the places where people actually physically are so you can shake their hand, give them a hug, buy them a glass of wine. And just to be clear about this, just really 4 years ago or 5 years ago, no one in the United States knew who the hell I was, or nor did they care. I had a great little tribe up here in Canada, and we were cranking out 7 figures in an incredibly tough space of personal development, and we'd been doing it for decades. But let's be clear about this. If I went to the United States and I spoke on stages, which I did, and I sort of expected my wisdom to carry me in the United States, the whole, all the United States was like, who gives a shit? Who's he? No, I don't care. Like, that's the honest God truth about it. So I started in the US exactly at that spot of nobody there knew or cared. And quite literally, by strategically going and attending, targeting specific people that I could create and contribute value for. That's how you and I connected, right? There was a weird thing at a mastermind. I stepped in, you asked me, hey, could you fill a room for you? Of course I could. So in that contribution and creating value, the foundation of relationships are made. And I don't care if your list is 0 or -10 or 500. When you figure out who you want to support and you get supporting them, that's where this begins to move. And, one of our declarations is joint venturing is a game of I'll go first. So you get on a plane, you go to an event, you meet somebody, and you become relevant and contribute value for them. That's where you start. You don't need a big list. You need to be valuable and relevant to somebody of significance.
Yeah, and go first. Like, I'll give an example way back in my beginning days. I went to exactly like you said, I went straight to the people. I made a list of who I wanted to go work with and who I knew I could align to what their offer was, like Mark Victor Hansen, Robert Allen, Ron LeGrand. I mean, just, a few of the old greats. Les Brown, did it with Brian Tracy. Almost spent a year with Brian Tracy, half a year with Zig Ziglar. And so I named those names because a lot of people, this was when I was just beginning. I mean, decades ago. And the deal, actually, Mark helped me do this. Mark Victor Hansen, he looked and he laughed. He said, how many people, young lady, do you have in your list? I said, I don't even remember at that time, but it was under 10, maybe 10,000, which is okay, but it wasn't grand. And so here's what go first can look like is I said, well, if somebody else, that had a bigger list or a bigger opportunity to be more of a matched database, how much would you let them keep first before you start sharing with me? And he said 20 grand. So that's what we did. And out of my list, he taught me how to upsell, and the first 20 went to him, and everything after that we shared. But I'll tell you, then when he went second and put me on his stage at that time when stages had thousands of people, I mean, do you remember those days, Jay? Right? I mean, it didn't take long for me to get a massive following because that was in the Chicken Soup for the Soul days. Yep. So, and I did everything I needed, but just to, give a live example to how when you go first and you're not greedy, I just have to add that because I think a lot of times people who, I'm just going to say the little millennial word, right, is you have to go first, and you've got to organize that the person with the biggest list or the biggest influence is going to win. And they need to win or they aren't going to, join support you.
Here's the other place where I think people get mixed up in this process, particularly if we're masterminding and if we're going to create like a little joint venture syndicate or any of those sorts of things. when we decide who we want to serve and support and become relevant to, we also have to recognize that, this is a show about money. And ultimately, when all these things happen, it makes great money. But don't get sucked into it's just about the size of the list. So a mutual friend of ours, Justin Livingston. So when I started in this space, he was the equivalent for me of your Mark Victor Hansen. And I liked him. He contributed to every single mastermind. He was very generous with me in terms of time and me understanding things. And it turns out he's a big Calgary Flames fan. He lives in Vancouver, but he's a Calgary Flames fan. Now, a couple of Flames live on my street. They made it to the finals a couple of years ago. So I just got a couple of tickets. And I called him and said, get your ass to Calgary, and I'll take you to one of the playoff games at the Saddle Dome, which he'd never been in Saddle Dome either. And that was a way in which I could contribute and connect outside of money, because my list was still tiny. I was still trying to find my way through. And what I was hopeful of, make no mistake, I was hopeful that he would JV with me, but it wasn't conditional upon that. It was like, let me contribute in a manner that I know is meaningful to you, and let's see what happens. And he became our single greatest JV partner in terms of, I would say, in the same way you said Mark put you on the map, I would say Justin put us on the map.
Yep. And it's been interesting because I've done deals with Justin too. And it is about, and I love that you also said earlier, get on a plane, because, when I've wanted deals in Asia or the UK, an interview which could be 15, 20 minutes, you don't even know. They want to see you live and they want to be in person. So I think that's just an eye opener for folks who want to get in the international space. The expectation isn't that it's all done on Zoom and Skype and you're going to have to get on airplanes. I think you need to. I think you can do a lot. So I don't want to say you can't do it on Zoom and Skype, but that's later when you have a very developed brand. I don't believe that's early stage behavior. I know for myself, I would expect them to get on a plane and come see me.
Hey, I just want to give a quick example of that. So one of the times where we were early in this launch process, so we're part of a mastermind group. We get on a plane and we go meet a bunch of people. But the way the structure was, it was surfacey. And this is the other thing about if you're going to join a JV community, I would probably recommend that you start with a smaller group than a larger group, because it looks great. It's like, there's 420 people, except you get there and you don't have any true bandwidth or time to get to the heart of it. And we get people who say to us time and again, it's like, in your JV summits, which is basically a joint venture mastermind, 30 people there. I did more deals in 2.5 days there than in 3.5 days with 400 people. It's because of the intimacy and the connection that can happen when you're there. So just to back that up, we're in this larger community. We get a whole bunch of people who are going to say, yeah, they'll play, all that fun stuff. We end up with, I think we got to like 78 JV partners for one of our launches. And it was literally under 5% of the people that generated 90% of the sales. And we did all this work online. There's 68 other people, when the truth is that I just got on a plane, flew to California, took my top 5, 6, 7 people for supper and got them involved. That would have been a far better investment of time, effort, energy, and money. And that would have been a 7-figure launch. So don't trip. And this is what I see people doing in this domain. They trip over dollars to pick up pennies. It's a false economy. Go spend the money on creating the relationships, getting in the mastermind, getting in the orbit, and make investments in relationships, because that's the part that pays over the long haul.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, I could go so many places. Which one comes first? I'll take the first vote, and then you might, give a different. I would say JVs come first. You get more lists, you get more distinction, you get more endorsements. But soon, you put in a mastermind, or you sell a mastermind as part of the JV when you get started. So again, a couple options on how,
Even our brand, JVology, it actually existed for a couple of years before Mastermind to Millions took off, and it grew organically. But the truth of the matter is this, is that masterminding takes, to launch a mastermind, takes some influence and some traction. And the way to get that influence and traction is joint ventures. And this is the other part that people miss out of this, is they think that it's all a mechanical process, but it's so not freaking mechanical. In this whole JV space, what you're really doing, and both you gave a great example, Loral, and I used one of Justin, is when you do a JV well, here's what's happening, is you're truly borrowing their influence and their reach to catapult you forward in terms of perspective, platform, and influence. And this isn't just about, hey, mail for me, which people have the most narrow, ridiculous view of this. The money and the conversion happens when we are actually strategically borrowing their influence so that we can actually have greater impact. And that's why the JV is always before the mastermind, in my humble opinion.
I agree. And I think that within 6 to 9 months, though, of starting to JV and build, anybody could start a mastermind.
Yeah, I agree.
So Jay, I know you have some goodies for somebody, that's out there. So whether it's a free download, a checklist, something that you want to give them, what's up there for you?
We've talked about 2 things simultaneously, and I'd love to give them 2 things if that would work out for you. And the first of which is this whole idea of joint venturing is we have a JV checklist. And it's super simple. It's at JVology. So that's JVology.com/checklist. And that is 40 things that you must do. It's literally in a checklist when you're going to support another person in a joint venture. It's 40 things that you must do to get great support from other partners in joint ventures. So that's JVology.com/checklist, and it will give you all of the framework that you need in that process. And then if there is anyone who actually is in the spot of starting their mastermind or blending these 2 things together, they could just go to mastermindtomillions.com and they can download our Mastermind Mentors Manual. It has the structure, it has the process. It's 52 pages that I use to actually train my team to run masterminds. And those 2 documents together are frankly worth their weight in gold.
Awesome. Jay, thank you for being on. And we get 19, we should, do something again. We did a little bit this year, 17, not much, 16, a ton. So, and I'm going to mention that as we complete today, to also say it's okay to take space, which I'm sure we could do a whole nother podcast, because I don't think people realize no, we're just not doing anything anymore. I think it's okay and actually fruitful to take space, you go do your thing, because now you have a whole different group following you. I have a different group. You were just with me in Palm Springs. Very different group than in 2015, 16, when we were doing a lot of activity together.
Yep.
So, for all of you, there's just a follow-up, stay in touch with the people you have joint ventured with. Even if it's been years, it doesn't mean it can't happen again or it won't happen again. I think having done this now for 30 years, I'm again well into my 20s of years of doing this. I still go back to Robert Allen, Mark Victor Hansen. I still go back to those guys, and it's been decades.
Yeah, it comes around it. And I really do believe that you hit the nail on the head, which is what I'm going to call the deliberate cycling of different marketplaces. Because that's really what it is, of reaching different marketplaces in a way that it doesn't become incestuous. Because the bad news sometimes of a JV mastermind is that there's 12 people in it, and it's all that same 12 people. We need to go outside of that to bring in new and different perspectives and people. So yes, you and I are on the same page, and you're on my hit list, my dear, to talk about the launch of the JVology regional chapters, because I know you've done a ton of work in that domain. Yep. So yes, you're on my hit list.
No, good, because you're on mine. So Jay, again, thank you. Thank you for joining. Those of you that are out there that want to have a further conversation with my team, you go to Ask Loral, AskLoral, AskLoral.com, and we'll continue that conversation. And always check on the date. Today is the day that I'm going to actually be answering thousands of questions on a huge Zoom phone call, and video. So check into those dates, register. You can go there, just ask a question, make a request, and we'll be back on Loral's Real Money Talks next week.
Thanks for listening to the Real Money Talks podcast. Your host has been Loral Langmeyer, author of 5 New York Times bestsellers, money expert on Dr. Phil, CNN, CNBC, The Street TV, Fox News, and The View. Want to learn more about off-Wall Street investing, tax strategies, and multi-million-dollar business strategies? Visit liveoutloud.com/podcast for past episodes, show notes, and resources. For some special wealth-building gifts only for Loral's podcast listeners, visit liveoutloud.com/podcast gifts. Do you have a burning question for Loral? Visit askloral.com to submit your question, and it may just be covered on a podcast episode. So stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to get new episodes every week.